My name is Ethan Rowe. I never thought I'd end up telling this story to anyone, let alone a stranger. But if there's even the slightest chance it stops someone from going through what I did, then maybe it's worth reliving. In 2021, after losing my job in Chicago, I moved back to my hometown in rural Montana. My uncle, a retired forest ranger, offered me his place while he was away in Arizona for the winter. The house sat along a winding two-lane strip called Black Pine Road, surrounded by miles of pine forest. It was the kind of place where you didn't see a neighbor for days, where the wind through the trees was the only sound. Peaceful, sure, but also lonely. There were only 2 other houses on the road. One was empty, its windows boarded up, roof sagging from years of neglect, and the other belonged to a man named Carl Benson, a grizzled loner I'd known since I was a kid. The abandoned one? Locals just called it the Hollow House growing up. I'd heard whispers about the place. People said that back in the late 80s, a family of 4 went missing inside it. No break-in, no signs of a struggle, they were just gone. Some said they'd joined a cult. Others swore the place was cursed, that it had a rot that spread to anyone who stayed there too long. I never gave it much thought. That is, until I had to drive past it every time I went into town. The first night I came back, around 11:30 p.m., I passed the Hollow House. My headlights caught something in an upstairs window, a shape, still unmoving, too pale to be a trick of the light. I looked away, telling myself it was my imagination. But deep down, I knew I'd seen someone. The first week was uneventful until Thursday night. Around 3:07 a.m., I woke to the sound of knocking. 3 slow knocks on the outside wall of my bedroom. I froze. My uncle's place was in the middle of nowhere. If someone was knocking, they weren't lost. Later that day, I went into town to the library and started digging through old microfilm records. That's when I found the article. Family disappears from Black Pine Road home, no evidence found. It described the night in 1988 when the Miller family vanished. The only detail that made my blood run cold was buried at the end. A neighbor reported hearing knocking on his wall the night before the family disappeared. 3 slow knocks. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of footsteps on the porch. Then came the knocks. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I gripped the baseball bat by my bed, but before I could move, I heard something else. A whisper through the door. "Ethan, it's safe now. Come to the house." The voice was my uncle's, but my uncle was 1,200 miles away in Arizona. The next evening, my curiosity finally broke me. At sunset, I walked down the road to the Hollow House. The front door was unlocked. The air inside was heavy, damp, and freezing. Wallpaper peeled from the walls in long, curling strips. Every step I took made the floor groan like something deep beneath me was shifting. In the kitchen, the table was still set with plates and silverware, as if the Millers had just stepped away. Then I heard it. Children laughing upstairs. I should have run, but I didn't. I climbed the stairs slowly, the laughter growing louder. At the top, the hallway stretched out like it went on forever, lined with doors. Every door was closed, except the last one. Inside was a woman, sitting in a rocking chair by the window. Her skin was gray, her hair matted, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She smiled, too wide, and said, "We've been waiting for you." Behind her, in the shadows, stood 3 more figures. Their faces were pale, their eyes black. One of them stepped forward. It was Carl Benson. "You shouldn't have come," he said. Then they all vanished. The room went cold. The door slammed shut behind me. I don't know how I got out. 1 second I was trapped in that room. The next I was standing in the middle of the road, gasping for breath, the house silent behind me. I ran home, packed my bags, and left that night. Carl's house was empty when I passed it. A week later, I read in the local paper that Carl had gone missing. I moved to Billings and haven't been back since. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear it, 3 slow knocks on my apartment wall. And I know whatever was in the Hollow House on Black Pine Road found me again. My name is Daniel Harker. I swore I'd never return to my hometown in West Virginia, but in late 2020, after a rough breakup and losing my job, I didn't have much choice. My cousin offered me his old place on Grayson Hollow Road, a winding two-lane road that cut through miles of dense forest before ending in a dead end. There were only 3 houses on the whole stretch. Mine was in the middle. At the far end stood a rotting, 3-story house everyone called the Grayson Hollow Place. When I was a kid, that house terrified me. Local kids dared each other to go up to the porch at night, but nobody lasted more than a few seconds. Stories about it were endless. People disappearing, strange lights at night, a woman's voice calling you by name even if she'd never met you. The very first night, I drove past it around 11:45 p.m. My headlights lit up the facade. Peeling paint, broken shutters, a porch sagging under decades of rot. And in one of the upstairs windows, someone was standing there. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stared down at me as I drove past. On the third night, I woke to the sound of 3 slow knocks on my bedroom wall. My bedroom faced the woods, no porch, no walkway, so unless someone had climbed the wall, there was no way to knock there. I stayed still, heart hammering. A minute later, the knocks came again, this time on the opposite wall. The next night, around 2 a.m., I heard it. Daniel. It was a woman's voice, soft, almost pleading, coming from outside my bedroom window. I looked out and saw only darkness between the trees. But the voice came again. Daniel, help me. I slammed the blinds shut and stayed in bed until sunrise. That I went into town and asked an old gas station attendant about the house. His face went pale. You saw her? He asked. When I nodded, he shook his head. Don't answer her. Don't go near that house. Once you hear her voice, she knows you. And she doesn't stop. At the library, I found old articles about the house. The earliest was from 1946, when a family vanished from it. Then another in 1962. Then again in 1983. Every disappearance had one strange detail in common. Neighbors reported hearing 3 slow knocks the night before. 1 week later, just after midnight, I heard the knocks again, this time on my front door. When I looked through the peephole, there was a woman standing there. She was barefoot, her skin pale, her hair dripping wet. She smiled and whispered, "It's warm inside. Let me in." I stepped back. She tilted her head, still smiling, and said, "Then come to my house." The next evening, I made the mistake of walking to the Grayson Hollow place. The door was open. The air inside was damp and freezing. Wallpaper peeled from the walls, and the wooden floor creaked like something underneath was moving. Upstairs, I heard children laughing. I followed the sound to a room at the end of the hall. Inside, a woman sat in a rocking chair, staring out the cracked window. Her skin was gray, her eyes glowing faintly. "We've been waiting for you," she said. In the shadows behind her, 4 other figures stepped forward. Faces pale, eyes black, mouths grinning too wide. One of them reached for me. The door slammed shut. The room went dark. When I came to, I was standing in my driveway. It was 3 a.m., and my shoes were covered in mud. The next morning, I drove out of Grayson Hollow and never went back. But sometimes, at night in my new apartment, I hear it again. 3 slow knocks. My name is Aaron Blake, and I've lived in big cities most of my life. I'm not easily rattled, at least, that's what I told myself until I spent the winter of 2022 in a place called Millers Creek, West Virginia. I was broke, between jobs, and my old college roommate, Tyler, offered me his uncle's cabin for a few months. The place was about 30 minutes outside of town, down a narrow, twisting stretch called Hollow Bend Road. It ran along the creek, past farmland, before disappearing into the woods. There were only a handful of homes, most empty during the winter. But one house stood apart, literally. About 2 miles past the cabin, tucked deep in the trees, sat a huge, sagging Victorian. Locals called it the Miller House. Tyler warned me about it on the drive-in. "Don't go near that place," he said. "People disappear out there." My first night at the cabin, I stepped out onto the porch around midnight to smoke. That's when I noticed a faint light in the distance, coming from the upstairs window of the Miller house. At first I figured maybe someone had moved in, but as I looked closer I could make out a figure, standing in the window, perfectly still, watching. 3 nights later it began. At 3:12 a.m., I woke to 3 slow knocks on the side wall of the cabin. I froze. The knocks came again, same pace, same rhythm. Then silence. When I told Tyler about it the next day, his face went pale. "Don't answer it," he said. "If it comes again, just stay inside until it stops." A week later, I woke to the sound of someone outside calling my name. "Aaron." It was a woman's voice, soft, almost pleading. I stepped to the window but saw only darkness. The voice came again, closer this time. "Aaron, help me." It sounded exactly like my mother. The problem was, my mother had been dead for 6 years. The town library. I searched the archives for Miller House. What I found chilled me. In 1954, the Miller family vanished overnight. No signs of a break-in, no bodies ever found. The only clue mentioned in the article: a neighbor reported hearing 3 knocks on his wall the night before. The same thing happened again in 1979, then in 1998. Each time, the same knocks were reported nearby. It was snowing heavily when I heard it again. 3 slow knocks, this time at the front door. I peered through the peephole. A barefoot woman stood there, hair dripping wet, skin pale as snow. She smiled and whispered, "It's warm in here. Let me in." When I didn't move, her smile widened. "Then come to my house." The next day, I hiked down Hollow Bend Road until I reached the Miller house. The front door creaked open when I touched it. Inside, dust coated everything, but the air was freezing cold, as if the place was breathing frost. I wandered into the kitchen. The table was still set with plates, silverware, and half-empty glasses, as though the family had just stepped away. Upstairs, I heard children laughing.